In the shifting sands of Egypt, a pharaoh was erased from history, his name shattered, his face destroyed, his memory cursed. Yet whispers say he left behind a key, not to treasure but to time itself. For centuries the secret slept beneath the desert, waiting. Then in the chaos of the 1930s an American scholar stumbled upon it. A manuscript that spoke of a corridor of light, a place where the past, present, and future collide. But knowledge this powerful cannot stay hidden. Governments, spies, and zealots would kill for it. What Eleanor Hayes discovered was not just history, it was destiny. And the choice she made inside those ruins could change the story of the world forever. The Egyptian desert at night. Hot winds rose from the dunes, whispering with the voices of 1,000 years of history. The Bedouins told a tale of a pharaoh who once lived, yet was erased. No statues, no inscriptions, only faint scratches on the walls of a forgotten temple. They called him the Nameless King. Legend said he defied the priesthood, the keepers of divine power. While other pharaohs obeyed, he declared that the human soul could travel beyond time itself, leaving traces for civilizations yet to come. To the ancient Egyptians this was blasphemy. The priests did what had never been done before. They erased his name from stone, shattered his statues, and condemned him to never have existed. But before his memory was destroyed, the king left behind a curse. When the sun walks its destined path, the corridor of light will open. Whoever enters shall see those not yet born, and know their fate. They said this corridor lay hidden in a temple buried by sand, revealed only at dawn on a single day in each century. Centuries passed, and the secret became a whisper in the wind. Caravans crossing the desert swore they had seen sunlight piercing deep into the earth, as if the sun itself touched another world. Yet no one dared to enter. Those who tried never returned. Strangely, fragments of papyrus about the erased pharaoh did not vanish entirely. Broken, almost unreadable scraps drifted westward through the black market of antiquities. In the early 20th century, a British scholar mentioned them in a private letter, calling it the Corridor of Light. In Egypt it was dismissed as myth. But in the West, especially in America where imagination hungers for mystery, the story carried an unusual allure. For it did not promise mere treasure. It promised knowledge that transcends time itself. What if the forgotten pharaoh had truly seen the future? What if, on a dark night in the desert, he carved into stone the names of people yet unborn, people destined to change the world? And what if, among those names were Americans? History we know is written by the victors. But in Egypt, some histories were not written, they were erased. And in that silence, the echoes grow louder. From that silence, a new journey begins, not by the pharaohs who sleep beneath the sand, but by an American who will stumble upon the secret the desert has guarded for 3,000 years. In the shadows of the desert, where the wind cries like voices of the dead, the curse endures, waiting for the one bold enough to step into the corridor of light. The year was 1922, and the world was about to be shaken by a discovery that felt ripped straight from myth. In the Valley of the Kings, British archaeologist Howard Carter unsealed the tomb of a boy king the world had nearly forgotten, Tutankhamun. Golden masks, alabaster jars, jeweled daggers, treasures so dazzling that newspapers called it the greatest find in history. Across the Atlantic, America fell into a fever. Movie theaters in New York and Chicago packed audiences for newsreels of the discovery. Department stores sold pharaoh jewelry, knockoffs to eager housewives. Broadway shows staged elaborate Egyptian fantasies, complete with sphinxes, pyramids, and painted hieroglyphs. Even in small towns, magazines printed images of golden sarcophagi, and suddenly everyone seemed to want a piece of the Nile. It was more than just fascination. For a country staggering into the roaring 20s, an age of jazz, skyscrapers, and social upheaval, ancient Egypt was a mirror, reflecting both mystery and immortality. America was young, bold, hungry for symbols of power that could match its ambitions. And what better symbol than a civilization that had endured for 3,000 years? Amid this craze, in the echoing lecture halls of the University of Chicago, sat Eleanor Hayes. She was no socialite looking for fashion trends. Eleanor was a restless mind, a young woman who found dusty textbooks and old papyrus scrolls far more intoxicating than parties. The daughter of a railroad engineer, she had grown up with stories of building tracks across deserts and mountains. Now she longed to build her own track, into history itself. While professors droned about dynasties and hieroglyphs, Eleanor's attention was caught by something stranger. In the margins of an obscure journal article, barely noticed by anyone, she read about a papyrus fragment circulating among European collectors. The fragment spoke of a corridor of light, a hidden chamber that would reveal names of those destined to shape the future. To most scholars, it was a curiosity at best, a fable at worst. But to Eleanor, in a decade where America believed anything was possible, it felt like a calling. What if the ancients had indeed glimpsed tomorrow? And what if that tomorrow somehow belonged to her country? The Egyptian craze gave her the perfect cover. Museums were buying crates of artifacts with barely a glance. Wealthy donors were funding expeditions, eager to have their names carved into history. If Eleanor could convince the right people, she too could sail to Egypt, not as a tourist but as a seeker of secrets. Her chance came in 1930, when she presented a lecture to the Chicago Historical Society. Most of the audience yawned through her talk on funerary rituals. But then Eleanor slipped in a single tantalizing line. What if the pharaohs did not only look to the afterlife, but to the future? What if they left messages for us? The room stirred. Some scoffed. Others leaned forward. And among them was a newspaperman from the Chicago Tribune, who smelled a headline. The next morning, the paper ran the story, "Young Scholar Claims Pharaohs Could See the Future." It was sensationalist, exaggerated, but it turned Eleanor Hayes into an unlikely celebrity. Letters poured in. Some mocked her, others begged her to share more. A few offered money. By the end of the year, Eleanor had what she needed: funding for a small American expedition to Egypt. Not backed by kings or empires, but by curious citizens and donors who wanted to believe. As she packed her notebooks and stared at the map of Egypt pinned above her desk, Eleanor whispered to herself, "If the corridor of light exists, I'll find it, and I'll bring its truth home." Little did she know, the secret waiting beneath the desert sands would not just test her scholarship. It would test her faith, her courage, and the very idea of what it meant to be American in an ancient world still full of shadows. The voyage to Egypt was long, and the ship that carried Eleanor Hayes across the Atlantic was filled with dreamers. There were tourists eager to photograph pyramids, missionaries clutching Bibles, and businessmen chasing opportunities in Cairo. Eleanor, however, carried only a battered suitcase, a stack of notebooks, and a single obsession: the corridor of light. When she arrived in Egypt, the Cairo air hit her like a wall. Dust, spices, heat, and the hum of thousands of voices. The Nile shimmered in the distance, timeless and indifferent. She had imagined grandeur, but what struck her most was the contrast. Crumbling temples standing beside telegraph poles, donkey carts moving past shiny Ford automobiles. Egypt, it seemed, was also a land caught between past and future. Her first stop was not the Valley of the Kings but a dimly lit antiquarian shop tucked into a Cairo alley. She had followed a lead whispered in an old letter from a German scholar, something about a papyrus that collectors had dismissed as fake. The shop smelled of parchment and dust. The owner, a wiry old man named Mahmoud, eyed her warily as she asked about the fragment. "You're another American?" he muttered, pulling out a drawer filled with scraps of papyri, scarabs, and broken amulets. "All of you want treasures. None of you want truth." Eleanor leaned forward. "I don't need gold. I need words. There's a text, something about a passage of light." Mahmoud studied her, then slowly pulled a rolled papyrus from beneath the counter. The edges were tattered, the ink faded, but Eleanor's heart pounded as she recognized the same phrase she had seen in the Chicago article. "The one who follows the light beyond Ra's horizon shall know the names of those yet to come." She paid with nearly every dollar she had brought and left clutching the fragile scroll like it was her own heartbeat. That night, by the flickering glow of a hotel oil lamp, Eleanor worked feverishly to translate the lines. The manuscript spoke of a hidden chamber buried beneath a temple of forgotten gods. Inside was said to be a wall of inscriptions unlike any other, not prayers to the afterlife but predictions, etched in hieroglyphs that shimmered like stars. But the papyrus also carried a warning: those who seek shall pay. The gods do not give knowledge freely. The next day, Eleanor brought the scroll to the American University in Cairo, hoping for scholarly help. Instead, she found skepticism. Professor Langford, a rotund man with wire spectacles, laughed outright. "Miss Hayes, half the papyri in this city are forgeries sold to gullible travelers. You'd be better off buying a map to Atlantis." But when she showed him the specific hieroglyphs, rare signs not seen in common forgeries, his laughter faltered. He dismissed her from his office, but she caught the look in his eyes: fear. That night, as she returned to her hotel, she realized someone was following her. A man in a dark galabeah trailed at a distance, vanishing whenever she turned a corner. When she finally spun around to confront him, he melted into the shadows. The message was clear: someone else wanted the manuscript. And so, Eleanor made her decision. If the scholars would not help her, if the authorities were too cautious, she would go herself. She recruited a small team, an Egyptian guide named Omar who knew the desert paths better than any map, and a photographer from New York named William Carter, no relation to Howard, who wanted adventure more than academic credit. Together, the three would follow the clues etched on the fragile papyrus. Their destination, the crumbling ruins of a temple far from the tourist routes, where the sands whispered of gods long forgotten. As their caravan prepared to leave Cairo, Eleanor tucked the manuscript inside her coat, whispering a silent vow. If there is a corridor of light, I will find it. Not for gold, not for fame, but for the truth. Behind her, the city roared with life. Ahead, the desert stretched out like an endless ocean of sand, ancient, merciless, and waiting. The desert has a way of stripping people down to their essence. Out there, beneath the unblinking sun and the eternal silence, pretenses fall away. Eleanor Hayes felt it with every mile the caravan pushed forward, the heat pressing against her skin, the sands whispering beneath the hooves of their camels. Her team was small but determined. Omar, her Egyptian guide, moved with a calm that came only from generations of desert wisdom. His eyes scanned the horizon constantly, reading the dunes the way a sailor reads the sea. William, the American photographer, was her opposite. Chatty, restless, forever adjusting the knobs on his bulky camera as though each frame might make him immortal. But Eleanor said little. Her thoughts clung to the manuscript rolled carefully in her satchel, every line of hieroglyphs seared into her memory. The text had been maddeningly vague, beyond Ra's horizon, where stone drinks light, but she believed the desert itself held the answers. On the third day the sandstorm came. It began as a dark smudge on the horizon, then rose into a wall of grit and fury. Omar shouted for them to cover their faces as the wind howled like an angry god. The camels brayed and stumbled. Eleanor dropped to her knees, clutching the satchel against her chest as the world dissolved into whirling dust. When it passed, the caravan was scattered and shaken. William's camera was buried in sand. Eleanor's lips were cracked and bleeding, but Omar was smiling. The desert tests those who enter, he said. If you survive, it means you're meant to go on. That night, under a canopy of stars, Eleanor studied the papyrus again by firelight. Her eyes caught a detail she had missed before, a small symbol etched into the margin, a cluster of 3 stars. Orion's belt. She looked up at the night sky, then back at the desert. The stars aligned perfectly with a jagged ridge of black stone in the distance. Her heart quickened. That's it, she whispered. That's the direction. 2 days later they reached the ridge. Rising out of the sands like the spine of some buried giant, the rocks cast long shadows across the dunes. And there, half buried beneath sand and time, stood the ruins of a forgotten temple. Its columns were toppled, its reliefs worn smooth, but Eleanor could still make out faint carvings, strange symbols, neither purely Egyptian nor Greek, as though this place belonged to something older, something outside of history. William set up his camera, the click of the shutter echoing in the still air. Omar traced the carvings with his fingertips, muttering prayers under his breath. Eleanor, meanwhile, pressed forward, her heart pounding. On one wall, the setting sun illuminated a single panel, stone etched with rays of light cascading downward, just as the papyrus had described. This is it, she breathed. The entrance. But when she tried to push against the stone, nothing moved. It was sealed tight. They searched the ruins for hours, prying at cracks, digging through sand, but the doorway refused to yield. Just as despair began to gnaw at her resolve, Eleanor noticed something. A series of shallow holes carved into the ground before the wall, forming a pattern. She dropped to her knees, brushing away the sand. It was Orion's belt again. Not a door, she whispered. A lock. At sunset, as the stars emerged, she aligned 3 bronze rods they had carried for camp tents into the holes. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ground shuddered, a deep groan rising from beneath the earth. The wall of stone split down the middle, revealing a dark passageway sloping into the depths. William let out a low whistle. Lady, you just opened a 3,000-year-old vault. Omar crossed himself. Be careful. No one builds a tomb without traps. Torchlight flickered across Eleanor's face as she peered into the darkness. The air that spilled out smelled of earth, incense, and something older, like time itself. She tightened her grip on the satchel. This is the corridor of light, she said softly, and we're going in. With that, she stepped across the threshold, into the shadows of a world untouched since the age of the pharaohs. The first thing Eleanor noticed was the silence. Not the natural hush of the desert night, but a silence so complete it seemed to swallow their breath. As their torches flared against the stone walls, the passage ahead glistened faintly, as if the rock itself had been polished to a mirror's sheen. They moved slowly, every footstep echoing back at them. The air was heavy, stale, carrying a faint tang of incense long extinguished. Strange symbols ran along the walls, familiar hieroglyphs blended with unfamiliar signs, spirals and stars carved with obsessive care. William muttered behind her, his voice low. "These aren't in any book I've ever seen." He raised his camera and snapped a photo, the flash bursting like lightning. For a moment, the corridor blazed with light, revealing something startling. Figures carved into the stone, human but elongated, their eyes wide, their hands raised toward the sky. Eleanor's pulse quickened. "They're not worshipping," she whispered. "They're pointing." Sure enough, the figures' hands aligned with constellations painted in ochre on the ceiling above. "Brian. Serious?" The Milky Way stretching across stone as though the ancient builders had captured the heavens underground. Omar's torch sputtered as he muttered a prayer. "This is not a tomb. This is something else." The passage narrowed, forcing them to walk single file. Every few steps, Eleanor's fingers brushed the walls, feeling shallow grooves, marks of chisels, yes, but also something more deliberate, as if the stone itself had been shaped with precision far beyond its time. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a vast chamber. Their torches barely touched the edges of it, the ceiling soaring high above like the inside of a cathedral. And at the far end stood a wall of stone that shimmered faintly, as though infused with its own light. The corridor of light. Eleanor's breath caught. The surface of the wall was carved with rows upon rows of hieroglyphs, but these were unlike any she had ever seen. Some glowed faintly under the torchlight as if dusted with crushed gems. Others seemed to shift when she looked away, rearranging themselves into patterns her mind could barely comprehend. William lifted his camera, trembling. "If I get this shot, we'll be famous." But as the flash went off, something strange happened. The wall seemed to ripple, and for a brief instant Eleanor swore she saw not symbols but names. Names she recognized. Washington, Lincoln, Roosevelt. They flickered across the stone like reflections in water, then vanished. Her knees weakened. It's impossible." Omar turned sharply. "No, it is dangerous. This place was sealed for a reason." But Eleanor couldn't look away. She stepped closer, her hand hovering inches from the glowing surface. "This isn't prophecy in the way we think," she whispered. "It's a record, as if the pharaohs were watching the future." Suddenly the chamber trembled. Dust rained from above. Somewhere in the darkness, stone cracked. The air filled with a deep, resonant hum, like 1,000 voices chanting at once. Omar shouted, grabbing her arm. "We must go. The gods do not want us here." But Eleanor was transfixed. The wall pulsed with light now, the symbols flowing together like a river of fire. She saw visions, a skyline of towers taller than pyramids, oceans filled with steel ships, a flag of stars and stripes fluttering above it all. She saw war, fire, triumph, and despair. And then she saw her own face reflected back at her, as if the corridor itself had etched her name into history. Her hand touched the stone. It was warm, alive. Then the chamber roared. A gust of wind blasted their torches nearly out, and the shimmering wall flared so brightly they were forced to shield their eyes. William dropped his camera, the glass shattering on stone. Omar dragged them both back toward the entrance as cracks spidered across the floor. By the time they stumbled out into the night air, the desert stars above seemed almost merciful. Behind them, the stone wall ground shut with a thunderous finality, sealing whatever knowledge had been inside. Eleanor clutched the manuscript against her chest, her heart racing. She had touched the corridor of light. She had seen proof, names, visions, futures etched by hands that should not have known them. William collapsed into the sand, gasping. No one will believe us." Eleanor's eyes burned with determination. "Then we'll make them." For she understood something now, something the papyrus had hinted at all along. The corridor wasn't about gold or gods. It was about power, the kind that could shape nations. And if America had stumbled into this secret at the dawn of its century, what would it do with it? As the wind swept across the dunes, Eleanor knew one thing. Her life would never again belong to her alone. She had crossed into a story as old as the pharaohs and as dangerous as the future itself. Cairo in 1930. The city roared with life. Car horns, donkeys, merchants hawking spices, and the scent of roasting lamb mixing with gasoline from Ford cars. But Eleanor Hayes heard none of it. She sat in a dim cafe near Midden Al Opera, the manuscript spread before her like a crime scene. Her hands trembled as she replayed the images from the corridor. Names carved in stone, visions of skylines and wars yet to come. William sat opposite, nursing a chipped cup of coffee. His face was pale, his usual banter gone. "Ellie," he whispered, "what we saw, if we tell anyone they'll lock us up. Or worse, they'll believe us." Omar, seated beside him, nodded grimly. "There are men who kill for lesser secrets. You must decide, are you a scholar or a prophet?" Before Eleanor could answer, a shadow fell across their table. Professor Langford, the same scholar who had dismissed her weeks earlier, now stood over them. His round glasses glinted, his lips curled in a thin smile. "You found it, didn't you?" he said quietly. Eleanor stiffened. "I don't know what you're talking about." Langford chuckled. "Please, do you think you're the first to chase legends in this desert? There are eyes everywhere. The corridor of light belongs not to you, nor to America, but to history. Hand over the manuscript." His tone was calm, but the two men flanking him were not academics. They were agents, broad-shouldered, foreign, their jackets bulging with pistols. Eleanor folded the manuscript and slipped it into her satchel. "Over my dead body." Langford's smile widened. "That can be arranged." What happened next was chaos. Omar flipped the cafe table, scattering cups and chairs, while William grabbed his camera tripod and swung it like a club. Eleanor bolted for the alley, clutching the satchel as shouts erupted behind her. Cairo's labyrinthine streets swallowed her whole, lantern light and shadows blurring together as she ran. By the time she caught her breath, she was standing before the American consulate. The stars and stripes fluttered above, a reminder of home. But when she staggered inside, seeking refuge, the faces that met her were not friendly. A tall man in a dark suit introduced himself simply as Agent Sullivan. His handshake was firm, his expression unreadable. He invited her into an office lined with leather chairs and polished wood. "We've been following your work, Miss Hayes," he said. "The United States government is very interested in Egypt's secrets, especially anything that might pertain to the future." Eleanor froze. "You mean the corridor?" Sullivan's eyes narrowed, confirming everything without a word. "The British think it belongs to them. The Egyptians naturally claim it's theirs. But America sees a greater purpose. Imagine if we knew history before it happened. Wars, markets, leaders. We could shape the century itself." Her stomach churned. She had come seeking knowledge, not weapons. "That's not what this is for," she protested. "It's a warning, not a tool." Sullivan leaned closer. "History isn't written by those who find warnings, Miss Hayes. It's written by those who act on them." For the first time, Eleanor realized the weight of what she carried. The corridor of light was no longer an archaeological curiosity. It was a battlefield, one that nations would fight over in shadows and whispers, far from the eyes of the public. That night, as she returned to her hotel under guard, William cornered her. "Ellie, you can't let them have it. The corridor, it'll eat them alive. You saw it? It doesn't just show the future, it chooses who sees it. You give it to governments, they'll twist it until the whole world burns." Omar, silent until now, finally spoke. "The ancients sealed it for a reason. Perhaps they knew men would use it for power, not wisdom." Eleanor lay awake until dawn, the city buzzing beyond her window. She had chased this secret for knowledge, for truth, but now the truth itself had become more dangerous than any lie. When the first rays of sunlight hit Cairo, Eleanor made a vow. She would not be a pawn for governments, nor for greedy scholars. If the corridor of light had chosen her to see its secrets, then she alone must decide how those secrets would be used. But deep down she already knew. The moment she touched that glowing wall, her life had stopped being hers. Somewhere, unseen forces were already moving, nations, spies, enemies, and she was caught in the center. The corridor had given her a glimpse of the future. Now she had to survive it. The manuscript lay open on Eleanor's desk, its fragile fibers trembling under the weight of a desk fan in her hotel room. The Cairo sun blazed through the shutters, casting stripes of light across the papyrus. For hours, Eleanor traced each line, whispering the translations to herself like prayers. William paced behind her, cigarette smoke curling in the air. "Ellie, you've been at this for days. You need sleep." "I need answers," she snapped, her eyes bloodshot. "These symbols, they're not just words. They're timelines." The papyrus described 3 ages, each marked by the rise of a distant land beyond the Western Sea. The first age was discovery, men crossing oceans, planting flags in soil not their own. The second was struggle, a land tearing itself apart, brother against brother, only to rise stronger. And the third, still to come, was destiny, a nation of stars guiding the world through both fire and darkness. America. She saw it with a clarity that made her breath catch. The land beyond Ra's horizon wasn't myth, it was her country. The pharaohs had not only mapped their own eternity, they had looked across time and seen the birth of another empire. She pushed the manuscript toward William. It's us. It's always been us. He squinted at the faded ink. Ellie, you're telling me Egyptian priests predicted the United States? Before Columbus even dreamed of crossing the Atlantic? Not predicted, she said firmly. Witnessed. The corridor doesn't show prophecy, it shows possibilities. And somehow they recorded what they saw. Omar, who had been silent by the window, finally spoke. His voice was grave. If that is true, then you carry not just history but fate. And fate is a dangerous burden. Before Eleanor could answer, there was a knock at the door. 3 sharp raps. She froze. No one knew they were here. William tensed, hand drifting toward a pocket knife. Omar moved quietly to the door, listening. The knock came again, followed by a voice. Miss Hayes. It's Sullivan. We need to talk. Eleanor's heart sank. The American agent had found them. They let him in reluctantly. Sullivan entered with the calm confidence of a man who already owned the room. His suit was immaculate despite the Cairo dust, his hat tipped low over sharp eyes. I'll get to the point, he said, closing the door. We know you've decoded part of the manuscript. We also know what it means. America is destined for greatness. But destiny is useless without control. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. The corridor of light is not a relic. It's a weapon. In the wrong hands, it could change everything. In the right hands, ours, it ensures the next 100 years belong to the United States. William bristled. You mean wars, coups, rigged elections? Stability, Sullivan cut in coldly. The kind only one nation can guarantee. The ancients saw America's role. It's your duty, Miss Hayes, to deliver it. Eleanor's throat tightened. Duty. That word rang in her ears like a curse. She had come to Egypt seeking truth, not to hand it over to men who spoke of destiny like it was theirs to command. I won't give you the manuscript, she said quietly. Sullivan's smile was thin. You don't have to. You'll come with us. The president himself will want to hear what you've seen. That night, after Sullivan left under promise of arrangements, Eleanor stared at the manuscript again. She thought of the names she had seen glowing on the corridor wall: Washington, Lincoln, Roosevelt. Leaders who had borne impossible burdens, shaping her nation's path through sacrifice. If they had been etched into history, was she now part of that same lineage? But another thought haunted her, the warning inscribed at the bottom of the papyrus. Those who seek shall pay. The gods do not give knowledge freely. What price would America pay if it wielded this power without restraint? William broke the silence. Ellie, you don't owe them anything. Not Sullivan. Not the government. Not even history. If you give them this, it'll change America forever, and not in the way you think. Eleanor pressed her palms against her temples, torn between fear and duty. She had found the corridor of light, but instead of answers, it had given her a question larger than she could bear. If America truly was destined to lead the world, should she help shape that destiny? Or should she bury it again the way the ancients had to save the future from itself? The air in Cairo was thick that night, heavy with dust and smoke drifting from the crowded markets. Eleanor sat on the balcony of her hotel room, staring down at the manuscript lit by a single oil lamp. Below, the street buzzed with voices and music, but in her mind there was only silence. She had seen the future, or at least pieces of it, and now the future was hunting her. William leaned against the railing, cigarette glowing in the dark. You know Sullivan won't wait long, he muttered. He'll come for you with or without your consent. Omar nodded grimly. And he's not the only one. I've heard whispers. Foreign agents, treasure hunters. The corridor has awoken something. Everyone wants it. Eleanor rubbed her temples. I should never have opened that wall. Maybe not, William said, flicking ash into the street below. But you did. And now you've got to choose what to do with it. The choice came sooner than she expected. Near midnight, the door burst open. Armed men flooded into the room. Egyptians, not Americans, their faces masked, their rifles gleaming in the lamplight. Omar shouted, drawing his knife, but the intruders overpowered them swiftly. William was struck across the jaw and crumpled to the floor. Eleanor felt rough hands seize her arms, wrenching the manuscript from her grasp. A tall figure stepped forward, his voice cold and smooth. Miss Hayes, you've been careless. It was Professor Langford. His eyes glimmered with triumph as he held up the manuscript. You thought you could keep this from me? From history? No, this belongs to the world. And I will be the one to reveal it. Eleanor's rage surged. You don't care about history. You care about your name in the papers. Langford smiled. Names are all that last, my dear. Look at the pharaohs. You know this better than anyone. You saw the wall. Tell me, what did it show you? Eleanor stayed silent. He crouched close, his breath sour with tobacco. It doesn't matter. Soon the corridor will speak again, and this time I'll be the one listening. Not you. With that, they dragged her, William, and Omar from the room. The city blurred into shadows as they were shoved into the back of a truck, the manuscript clutched in Langford's greedy hands. The engine growled, carrying them toward the desert. Hours later, they reached the ruins where Eleanor had first unlocked the hidden passage. Under the cold light of the stars, Langford barked orders, his men hauling torches and ropes into the temple. He forced Eleanor forward, pressing the manuscript against her chest. You opened it once, he hissed. You'll open it again. Her heart pounded. The wall had sealed itself when they fled. Could it even be opened twice? And if it could, what would it reveal now? Omar leaned close, whispering in her ear as they walked. He doesn't understand. The corridor chooses. Not him. Inside the ruins, the air was thick and suffocating. Langford shoved her toward the stone panel, the same one she had unlocked before with the alignment of Orion's stars. His men jammed torches into the ground, the chamber flickering with firelight. Do it, Langford commanded. Eleanor hesitated. She could feel the weight of the desert pressing down on her, the warning from the papyrus echoing in her mind. Those who seek shall pay. She turned her head slightly toward William and Omar. If I do this, she whispered, we may not leave alive. William wiped blood from his lip, grimacing. Then let's make sure he doesn't either. With trembling hands, Eleanor began the ritual. She aligned the rods with the holes, the chamber rumbling as stone ground against stone. Slowly, impossibly, the wall split open once more, revealing the shimmering glow of the corridor beyond. Langford's eyes widened with greed. At last. But as he stepped forward, the ground shuddered violently. The air filled with a low hum, deeper than thunder. The symbols on the wall flared with blinding light, casting eerie shadows across the chamber. Langford cried out, clutching his head as though the visions were tearing into his mind. Eleanor grabbed Omar's arm. Now. In the chaos, William swung a torch at one of the guards, sending flames spilling across the floor. Shouts erupted, smoke filling the chamber. Langford staggered toward the wall, screaming. I see it. I see everything. His voice cracked into madness. The kings, the wars, my name carved among them. And then the wall blazed white. When the light faded, Langford lay crumpled on the ground, motionless. The manuscript, torn from his grip, fluttered to the floor beside him. Eleanor snatched it up, heart hammering. She turned to William and Omar. We have to leave now. Behind them, the corridor pulsed once more as if alive, then sealed itself with a thunderous crack. The echoes followed them into the night, chasing them across the dunes. By dawn, they were miles from the ruins, their bodies exhausted, their minds reeling. Langford was gone. The corridor was sealed again. But the seeker was not. Eleanor looked down at the manuscript clutched in her hands. The ink seemed darker now, as though the corridor itself had rewritten part of it. And in that moment, she understood the truth. The corridor didn't just reveal the future. It changed those who touched it. And now it had changed her. The Cairo train station was chaos. Steam hissed from the great iron engines, porters shouted, families wept and embraced. Eleanor pulled her scarf tighter around her head, trying to vanish into the crowd. The manuscript was strapped beneath her coat, wrapped in oilcloth, heavy as a chain across her chest. Behind her, William limped slightly, the bruise from Langford's men still dark across his jaw. Omar led the way, weaving through the press of bodies with a soldier's instinct. But his eyes kept scanning the shadows. He knew what Eleanor feared. Langford's death had not ended the hunt. It had only multiplied it. Word of the corridor spread like wildfire. Rumors rippled through Cairo, an ancient power rediscovered, a secret buried by kings and cursed by gods. Treasure hunters, foreign agents, even local warlords began sniffing through the ruins. Everyone wanted the manuscript, and everyone knew Eleanor had it. Tickets, Omar whispered, pressing 3 slips of paper into Eleanor's hand. We take the night train south. What, sir? Safer than Cairo, at least for now. William frowned. Running again? We can't keep running forever. Eleanor shot him a look. Would you rather stay here and hand this over to the highest bidder? You saw what it did to Langford. He said nothing, only adjusted the revolver hidden beneath his coat. The whistle blew. They boarded, slipping into a second-class compartment. The train jolted forward, pulling them into the desert night. Eleanor leaned back against the seat, exhaustion tugging at her, but her mind refused to rest. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the corridor, the blazing light, the voices whispering of empires rising and falling. Across from her, Omar dozed lightly, one hand still gripping his knife. William lit a cigarette and watched her through the smoke. "You've changed," he said quietly. Eleanor's eyes snapped open. "What do you mean?" "You're different since the corridor. Harder. Like it's still inside you." She looked away. "Maybe it is." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the rattle of the tracks. Then came the footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Just outside their compartment. Eleanor's pulse quickened. She reached instinctively for the manuscript. William stubbed out his cigarette, hand drifting to his revolver. Omar's eyes opened at once. The door slid open. A man in a dark suit stepped inside. American mid-40s, hair slicked back. He smiled pleasantly as though they were old friends. "Miss Hayes," he said, his accent unmistakable. "You've been difficult to find." Eleanor's stomach dropped. "Who are you?" The man tapped the brim of his hat. "Special Agent Donovan. United States Bureau of Strategic Antiquities." William barked a bitter laugh. "That's not a real bureau." Donovan's smile didn't falter. "It is now." His eyes flicked toward the bulge beneath Eleanor's coat. "You have something that belongs to us." Eleanor tightened her grip. "It belongs to no one. And certainly not to the U.S. government." Donovan sighed as if disappointed. "You misunderstand. I don't want it for myself. Washington does. We can't let a discovery of this magnitude fall into the wrong hands. Imagine if the Soviets heard whispers of a machine that sees the future." William cursed under his breath. The Cold War had crept into their lives like a shadow. Donovan leaned closer. His voice was smooth, almost kind. "Give me the manuscript. You'll be safe. Protected. You can even help us study it. Think of it, Miss Hayes, your name in the history books. Your work recognized by the world." For a moment, Eleanor felt the weight of the temptation. Recognition. Safety. An end to the endless running. But then she remembered Langford's face twisted in madness, remembered the bodies buried in the tombs, sacrificed for kings who thought themselves eternal. She shook her head. "No." Donovan's smile vanished. His eyes hardened like glass. "Then you've made yourself an enemy of the United States." The compartment exploded into motion. William shoved Donovan backward, the revolver flashing in his hand. Omar kicked the door shut, fists flying at the two other men who surged in from the corridor. The train rocked, screams echoing down the cars as passengers scattered. Eleanor clutched the manuscript to her chest, ducking as a shot shattered the window. The desert wind howled through the compartment, papers swirling like birds. She saw Donovan's hand reaching for her, his eyes burning with cold fury. Then Omar slammed him into the wall. "Go," he shouted. Eleanor hesitated. "I can't leave you." "Go," he roared again. She stumbled out into the corridor, William at her side, gun still smoking. Behind them, the fight raged, steel against flesh, bone against wood. Eleanor didn't look back. They leapt from the moving train. The ground hit hard, knocking the breath from her lungs. Sand filled her mouth, her eyes, her ears. William dragged her up, both of them staggering under the moonlit sky. Behind them, the train thundered away into the distance, carrying Donovan and his men deeper into the night. For a long moment, they stood gasping in the silence of the desert. Only the stars bore witness. Eleanor pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the manuscript still there. Still safe. William touched her shoulder. "You realize we've just declared war on America, right?" Eleanor's lips trembled into the ghost of a smile. "Then let's make sure it's a war worth fighting." The desert wind stung Eleanor's face as she and William trudged through the dunes. By dawn, their throats were raw with thirst, and their clothes were caked in dust. Yet through it all, Eleanor clutched the manuscript against her chest, as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Hours later, a small truck appeared on the horizon. Omar was at the wheel. His face was bruised, his arm in a makeshift sling, but his eyes still burned with loyalty. "You jumped," he said flatly, pulling them aboard. "Good." Donovan stayed on the train. "He'll follow." William smirked grimly. "Let him. At least now we know who the enemy is." But Omar shook his head. "The Americans are not the only ones. Others have heard. The Brotherhood of Luxor has been waiting for this moment. If anyone can tell you what this manuscript truly is, it is them. By evening they reached Luxor. The city pulsed with life, market stalls spilling over with spices and fabrics, children running through alleys, the Nile glowing gold under the setting sun. Yet beneath its beauty, there was an ancient weight, as though the stones themselves remembered the footsteps of kings. Omar guided them away from the tourist avenues and into the labyrinth of older streets. There, hidden behind a crumbling facade, was a modest doorway guarded by two men in plain robes. They stepped aside silently as Omar led the way inside. The chamber was dim, lit by oil lamps that flickered against walls carved with hieroglyphs. At its center sat an elderly man in a simple white robe. His beard was silver, his eyes sharp despite the deep creases of age. "This is Sheikh Karim," Omar whispered, "keeper of the Brotherhood." Karim rose slowly, leaning on a carved staff. His gaze lingered on Eleanor, then on the manuscript beneath her coat. "You have brought us what we feared and what we awaited," he said in perfect English. His voice was steady, carrying the weight of centuries. Eleanor laid the manuscript gently on the table. "What is it? What did we find?" Karim's fingers traced the faded ink, his eyes clouding with memory. "The corridor of forever is no myth. It was a covenant, forged by priests of the Old Kingdom who believed they could bind time itself. The manuscript is not only a map, it is a key. With the proper ritual, the one who wields it may glimpse, or alter, the flow of fate." Eleanor's breath caught. "Alter." Karim nodded gravely. "Yes. Empires rise and fall not by accident, but by hands that dare to turn the river of destiny. Pharaohs tried. Some succeeded briefly. But each time the price was blood. Too much blood." William leaned forward, his face pale. "You're telling me the pharaohs built their power not on armies but on this?" Karim's eyes did not waver. They believed themselves gods because the corridors showed them glimpses of eternity. But they were still men. And men cannot hold infinity without breaking. A heavy silence filled the chamber. Eleanor felt her hands trembling. She thought of Ramses, of Akhenaten, of Tutankhamun. Their madness, their obsessions, their downfall. Had all of it been shaped by this cursed knowledge? Karim's voice softened. "The Brotherhood has guarded this truth for centuries. We feared the day the corridor would return to mortal hands. Now it has." He turned to Eleanor, his eyes piercing. "The choice is yours. Destroy it and preserve the balance. Or keep it and risk everything." Eleanor's chest tightened. She had crossed deserts, outwitted rivals, nearly died to protect the manuscript. And now she was being told to burn it? William slammed his fist against the table. "You can't be serious. Do you realize what America or Russia would do with this? If Eleanor destroys it, someone else will find another way." Karim shook his head slowly. "Perhaps. But knowledge of the corridor always comes with a curse. The one who seeks to command time will be devoured by it." Eleanor whispered, almost to herself, "Langford." He saw it and it drove him mad. Karim bowed his head. "As it has time and again." Omar stepped forward, eyes locked on Eleanor. "You are not like the others. You seek truth, not crowns. That is why fate placed it in your hands." Eleanor stared at the manuscript, its pages brittle with age, yet pulsing with invisible power. Her whole life had been spent chasing the past, searching for meaning in bones and ruins. And now she held something that could bend the future itself. But at what cost? William's voice was sharp, urgent. "Eleanor, don't listen to him. If the Brotherhood had their way, we'd still be living in the Dark Ages. With this, we could save millions. Think of what America could do: end wars before they start, cure diseases before they spread." Karim's staff struck the floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "And who decides which wars end? Which lives matter more than others? That is not salvation, it is tyranny." The chamber grew still. The flames of the lamps flickered wildly, casting shadows that seemed to twist into pharaohs' faces on the walls. Eleanor felt them watching her, as though every ruler of Egypt leaned forward, waiting for her answer. She pressed her hands against the manuscript. The ink burned cold against her palms. For a heartbeat, she thought she heard the corridor's whispers again, promises of glory, of knowledge, of eternity. She closed her eyes. "I don't know what I'll choose," she said softly. "But I know one thing. No government, no empire, no brotherhood will make the decision for me. Not anymore." Karim's gaze lingered on her. Then, slowly he inclined his head. "So be it." The torches guttered. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolled midnight. And outside, in the streets of Luxor, Donovan's men were already closing in. The first sign of trouble was the faint vibration in the stone floor. At first, Eleanor thought it was her imagination, the aftershock of Kareem's words, or perhaps her own racing heartbeat. But then the lamps rattled in their sconces, dust trickled down from the ceiling, and Omar's head snapped toward the doorway. "Engines." "Donovan," William muttered, his jaw tightening. The Brotherhood guards outside shouted something in Arabic, their voices sharp with urgency. A second later, gunfire cracked through the night. The ancient walls shuddered under the sound, echoing like thunder through the chamber. "They've found us," Omar said, already pulling a pistol from beneath his robe. "They came faster than I thought." Kareem remained seated, his face calm even as chaos surged around him. The manuscript has awakened too much interest. Fate rushes toward its test. Eleanor's throat tightened. "We need to get out, now." The narrow streets of Luxor erupted in violence. Donovan's convoy, black jeeps and a pair of armored trucks, tore through the alleys, headlights cutting harsh beams through the dust. Armed men poured into the quarter, their shouts mixing with the panicked cries of civilians scrambling to flee. Inside the Brotherhood sanctuary, the defenders scrambled to hold the line. The heavy wooden doors groaned under the first wave of bullets, splinters flying like shrapnel. William grabbed Eleanor's arm. "Back tunnels. Every old temple has them." "Kareem?" The old sheik nodded once. "Through the scriptorium. But know this, if you carry the manuscript into the night, you will be hunted until the end of your days." "Better hunted than dead," William shot back. But Kareem's eyes never left Eleanor's. "The test is not survival. The test is choice." The doors cracked, light blazing through as Donovan's men slammed forward. They ran. Down corridors lined with crumbling papyrus shelves, past flickering torches and walls etched with falcons and cobras. Eleanor clutched the manuscript to her chest, every step echoing with the weight of history. Behind them, gunfire roared. The Brotherhood guards fought fiercely, their shouts mingling with the rattle of rifles. The clash sounded hopeless, ancient faith against modern steel. At the end of the hall, Omar threw his shoulder against a hidden panel. Stone scraped against stone, and a passage yawned open, narrow and black as the abyss. "This way," he barked. They plunged into the darkness. The air was damp and stale, heavy with centuries of dust. Eleanor's lungs burned, but she forced herself onward, one hand gripping William's sleeve, the other never letting go of the manuscript. Above them the world shook. Explosions thudded through the earth. Donovan was not content with a siege. He meant to rip the Brotherhood sanctuary apart stone by stone. At last, the tunnel opened onto the open night. They stumbled out into a neglected courtyard behind a row of abandoned houses, the stars wheeling overhead like cold fire. The Nile glimmered faintly beyond the rooftops. But freedom was an illusion. A spotlight flared, searing Eleanor's eyes. A voice rang out, amplified through a megaphone. "Dr. Carter." "William, you can't run forever." Donovan stepped into the light, flanked by armed men. His suit was dusty, his tie loosened, but his smile was sharp as ever. In his hand, he held a revolver, not the weapon of a soldier, but of a man who wanted to savor the moment. "You've done well," Donovan said, his tone almost paternal. "Better than Langford, better than anyone. But your children playing with fire. Give me the manuscript, Eleanor. Let me put it where it belongs, in the hands of men who can use it." William raised his pistol. "Like how?" The mercenaries lifted their rifles, red laser dots dancing across the walls. Eleanor felt her pulse thunder. Behind Donovan, the city of Luxor still bustled, unaware or perhaps unwilling to know that a secret older than empires was about to change hands in its streets. Kareem's words echoed in her mind. The test is choice. She gripped the manuscript tighter. "Donovan," she called, her voice surprisingly steady. "Do you even know what this is?" His smile widened. "The key. The key. With it, America will no longer react to history. We'll write it. Imagine it. No more wars lost, no more threats unchecked. A nation eternal. Or a nation damned." Omar spat. Donovan barely glanced at him. "Spare me the mysticism. Every empire is built on blood. The difference is whether it achieves greatness. Don't you want to be part of something that lasts forever?" Eleanor's heart pounded. She could almost feel the corridor whispering inside her mind again. A chorus of voices, pharaohs and queens, generals and slaves, all pressing against the veil of time. They promised her power. They promised her clarity. They promised her the chance to never lose anyone again. William's voice cut through the haze. "Don't listen. He's not offering you history. He's offering you chains. Donovan's revolver rose slowly, aimed at William's chest. If you won't be reasoned with, I'll remove the distraction. Eleanor's scream tore through the night. Before Donovan could fire, Omar hurled himself forward, knocking the revolver aside. A shot rang out, sparking against stone. Chaos erupted, shouts, gunfire, the sharp clang of metal. Eleanor ducked behind a column, clutching the manuscript as bullets cracked overhead. William fired back, each shot echoing off the ancient walls. Donovan's men swarmed forward, and in the chaos, Eleanor knew this was no longer a negotiation. The siege of Luxor had begun, and the fate of history itself now rested in her hands. The gunfire dwindled, replaced by the low thrum of something deeper, a sound that didn't belong to rifles or jeeps. It seemed to rise from the ground itself, vibrating through Eleanor's bones. The manuscript burned hot in her hands as if alive. Donovan froze mid-stride, his revolver still aimed at William. His face shifted, for the first time betraying unease. "What did you do?" Eleanor barely heard him. The manuscript's hieroglyphs glowed faintly in the moonlight, light pulsing through the cracks in the parchment. Her breath caught as she realized the corridor wasn't just a tomb, wasn't just a myth. It was a living thing, and it had been waiting. The earth split. Stone groaned, centuries of dust cascading like waterfalls. In the plaza where they fought, a circle of paving stones sank away, revealing a spiral staircase carved into the bedrock. From the depths below, golden light poured upward, shifting like liquid fire. Donovan's eyes widened. "It's here." He lunged, but Omar tackled him again, dragging the revolver aside. The shot cracked harmlessly into the night. "Go!" Omar shouted at Eleanor. "Before he takes it." William grabbed her wrist. "Ellie, are you insane? You can't go down there." But Eleanor couldn't stop. The light pulled at her like gravity. The whispers filled her skull again, not threatening this time, but pleading, inviting. She tore free of William's grip and started down the staircase. The air grew hotter as she descended, thick with incense and something older, a metallic tang like lightning frozen in stone. Her torch was useless. The walls themselves radiated golden light, every surface etched with hieroglyphs that writhed as if alive. At the bottom lay a chamber vast beyond comprehension. Pillars carved like lotus stems rose into darkness, their crowns vanishing into a ceiling so high it might have been the sky itself. In the center stood an altar of black basalt, smooth and perfect, untouched by time. And above it, suspended in the air, shimmered a veil of light, a doorway that wasn't a doorway. Through it, Eleanor glimpsed shifting visions, pyramids rising from the sand, armies marching across deserts, skyscrapers gleaming over rivers, cities burning. The past, the present, and something else entirely. The corridor of light. Her knees weakened. Thrill. Donovan burst into the chamber moments later, dragging Omar by the collar, his revolver jammed against the old man's temple. William stumbled behind, blood on his arm where a bullet had grazed him. "Step away, Dr. Carter," Donovan barked. His voice echoed like a command from the gods themselves. "Hand me the manuscript. I'll finish what you started." Eleanor turned slowly, her chest heaving. "You don't understand. This isn't a weapon. It's a mirror. It shows us what we could be, but it doesn't choose. We do." Donovan sneered. "Spare me the poetry. History is written by those who act, not those who philosophize. America needs this. I need this." He thrust his gun toward the veil of light as if threatening it. "Give it to me." For a heartbeat, the chamber went silent except for the hum of the corridor. Eleanor looked at William, battered, desperate, shaking his head. "Don't do it." She looked at Omar, still held hostage, his eyes steady, unafraid. And then she looked at the veil. The voices surged, wrapping around her like a storm. "Show us. Choose. Speak the name and the path will be written." Her mouth went dry. She realized that if she read the final line of the manuscript aloud, the corridor would answer. It would imprint itself on history, for Donovan, for America, for whoever claimed it. But if she stayed silent, the knowledge might die with her. Her choice was sharp and brutal. Eleanor lifted the manuscript high. The golden light bled into the parchment, each symbol glowing with divine fire. Donovan's eyes widened in triumph. And then Eleanor did something he hadn't expected. She tore the manuscript in half. The sound was like thunder. The parchment burst into flames, disintegrating into ash that swirled upward into the corridor itself. The veil shuddered, rippling like a disturbed pond. The visions inside it flickered, empires rising and falling, kings crowned and dethroned, before collapsing into a storm of pure light. "No!" Donovan screamed, shoving Omar aside and lunging toward her. "You fool, you've destroyed it." Eleanor stood firm, her face bathed in the glow. "No. I freed it. No one owns history. Not you. Not me. Not anyone." The corridor pulsed once as if acknowledging her words. Then, with a sound like 1,000 doors slamming shut, it imploded into itself, vanishing, leaving only darkness and silence. The aftermath was chaos. Donovan staggered, his revolver slipping from his hand. His eyes were wild, empty, as if something inside him had shattered along with the manuscript. With a ragged cry, he fled into the tunnels, his footsteps fading into the distance. Omar knelt, whispering prayers into the dust. William slumped against a pillar, clutching his wounded arm, his gaze fixed on Eleanor. "You destroyed it," he said softly. "All that power, gone." Eleanor lowered herself beside him, her hands trembling. "Not gone. Preserved." The corridor wasn't meant to be controlled. It was meant to remind us. William let out a shaky laugh. "Remind us of what?" She looked toward the empty altar, where faint wisps of golden dust still drifted. "That history is fragile. That power tempts. That the only way forward is choice." They emerged into the dawn. Luxor's skyline glowed pink and gold in the early light, the Nile flowing steady and eternal. The city bore scars of the siege, bullet holes, shattered windows, but life was already stirring. Merchants shouted in the markets. Children played in the alleys. The world went on. Eleanor stood at the river's edge, the weight of what she had done pressing against her chest. She had held the future in her hands and let it go. Omar placed a hand on her shoulder. "You passed the test. Not by seizing power, but by refusing it." William adjusted his ruined camera, managing a tired grin. "Well, Ellie, I guess you won't be famous for finding the corridor. But maybe that's the point." Eleanor's eyes lingered on the river, its surface shimmering like liquid glass. "Maybe," she whispered. "Or maybe the real legacy is that no one ever will." The wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of dust, lotus blossoms, and something older, the echo of the corridor itself. Eleanor closed her eyes and breathed it in, knowing she would carry its memory forever. History was safe. For now.